Welcome to Ordinary to Badass. Whether you're ordinary or badass, I am so glad you're here. Today's guest is Michelle Gauthier. Michelle, thank you so much for being here. Excited to have you on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
So before we go any further, I've got to ask you, do you consider yourself ordinary or badass?
Badass.
Nice.
I haven't always been a badass, but now I definitely consider myself a badass.
So what was the changing point for you? Was there one instance specifically that made you feel like a badass? Was it a series of events over time?
I think it was a series of events over time, but the biggest thing that makes me feel like a badass now is that I don't spend time thinking about what other people are thinking about me or basing what I do based on what like society says I should do or what looks good on paper or whatever it is. I think really living my life as my most authentic self is what makes me feel like a badass. And it took a lot of steps to get there.
Can you share one step with us of something you say to stop worrying about what other people are thinking?
Yes, I do. I think that we can never control what someone actually thinks about us. So worrying about it is just a waste of time. And I like to think about some of the things that they could be thinking about me, and I'll think them in both directions. So, for example, if someone at my children's school asks me to volunteer for something, I like volunteering at my kids' schools, but if I can't do it or I don't want to that time and I say no, I think, well, they might not like me if I say no. Okay. Or they might already like me and they might like me more if I say no. Or I have no idea how they feel about me. And if I say yes or no to this opportunity, it's not really going to influence the way that they think about me. I can't control that at all. I tell myself that trying to please other people or do things in order to please other people is actually more controlling because you're trying to control the way that they feel about you instead of just being you, who you want to be.
So you tell yourself, don't be a control freak.
Yeah, exactly. I really do. I really do. I also think that the more comfortable you are with yourself, the less you care about what other people think about you. So I feel really good about the choices I make and how I'm living my life. If I didn't, then I might be more worried about it, but I'm not.
And does it get easier with time? Like the more that you like stop stressing about it or you kind of put it aside, does it get easier and easier?
Yes, yes. One of the things I teach my clients to do a lot is to say no. And I just noticed that now when I say no to something that I don't want to do, it causes me zero stress. And it used to, at the beginning, it would make me want to, well, first of all, at the beginning, I would have just said yes, even when I wanted to say no. And then when I started saying no, kind of made me want to throw up, feel sweaty, all that. And then it got to where it was just kind of uncomfortable and then, slightly uncomfortable. And now it's nothing. So I feel like as you practice these things, you just start getting better and feeling better about it.
Okay, definitely want to dig into that more because I know that saying no is hard for a lot of us. But first, will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, sure. So, my name's Michelle. As you said, I live in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm a life coach and I coach busy, overwhelmed working women who are just feeling really overwhelmed with life. I'm a single mom of two kids, and I feel like I'm super qualified for this job because I used to be a very busy, overwhelmed working mom myself. And about in 2017, I quit my job. I had like a 20-year corporate career in finance and I actually really liked being in the corporate world. Some people say they hated it, but I actually liked being in the corporate world. But I got to the point where I just felt like I wasn't doing anything meaningful. So I decided that I was going to get training to become a life coach. I did that while I was working. I saw clients on the side for a little while. And then, probably in my first major badass move, I quit my secure, well paying job to start my own business. At that same time, I got separated from my then husband, sold the house we lived in, moved into a smaller house with my kids, renovated this house, and got a puppy all within like 2 months' time. So that's me. Since then, since about 2018, I've been working full time as a life coach.
And who do you help as a life coach?
Women who are feeling overwhelmed and stressed. Lots of times they come to me because they hate their job and maybe they want to switch industries or they feel like they can't balance everything. A lot of times it's moms who are feeling like guilty about not being with their kids when they're at work. And then when they're at home with their kids, they're trying to check in on their work email all the time, or someone who's really having a hard time in their relationship. So maybe they think they want to get divorced, or they're having a really hard time with their mom. So those are usually the types of clients who I work with.
So you mentioned this idea of not being able to balance everything. It can often feel like there's so many things on the to-do list and you don't have time to check them off. How do you start to feel like you have more balance in your life?
Yeah, I think the first step is really just acknowledging that it's not like we're climbing this peak and when we get to the top, we're at balance and we just stay there and hang out, that it's an everyday choice and you just have to feel good about the choices that you're making for that particular day. I think it's too overwhelming to say, oh, I'm going to try to make my life balanced every moment of every day or feel happy every moment of every day. So I teach my clients to notice when they're feeling most overwhelmed, and I work with them on how they're thinking about it. We come up with new actions they can take. Again, if you learn to say no, that takes a lot of stuff off your calendar. If you have boundaries, that frees up a lot of your time in your thinking. If you outsource everything that isn't something that you absolutely want to do. Like, for example, I have someone come on Tuesdays and picks up my laundry, and on Wednesdays, it comes back folded to my house. That's a good example of something that was taking a lot of time for me. And it wasn't my favorite thing to do. I didn't particularly enjoy it. So I encourage outsourcing. So there are lots of different ways that you can get less on your to-do list.
So do you think it's actually about the list, or do you think it's more of like a mindset thing and a way of navigating it?
Yes, that. I think it's definitely that, because if you start today, like if you woke up this morning and wrote down a list of absolutely everything that you could do today, need to do today, I'm using air quotes on need, you might come up with 25 things, and then that becomes your expectation when realistically you can maybe do three. And at the end of the day, when you've checked off three, instead of celebrating, awesome, I got those three things done, you're like, oh, I didn't even get close. And now I'm going to rewrite all these things again tomorrow. And I'm stuck in this circle. So I think it's a lot about setting a realistic expectation. How many hours a day do you really have at work? How many hours a day do you have at home? How many of those hours do you want to spend running around the house or doing laundry or dishes or those kinds of things? I feel like, at least in my case, there are some of those things that I do because I really enjoy relaxing in my house when it's picked up and clean. But I plan my day so that after about 7:30, 8 o'clock, there's nothing on the schedule.
And what does that do for you?
Oh, it's amazing. I just do not overschedule myself in any way, shape, or form. And it just makes me feel so calm and present and relaxed. The other day, I was listening to a podcast and I was just laying on my bed and listening to the podcast and not doing anything else. And I thought, wow, I've come a really long way, because podcasts used to be, I had this need to always be doing at least two things. So I was like, well, if I'm going to do the dishes, I'll listen to a podcast. And I still like to do that. There's nothing wrong with it. But now I've just gotten so much better about just taking time, taking things slowly. Another example is I love working out, and I used to work out at 5:30 in the morning because it was the only time I could fit it in. And once I had my own business, I realized I don't actually have to do that anymore. I can go to an 8:30 workout class, but I just had this story in my mind that that's what I had to do. So I started going to 8:30 reluctantly, honestly. And it has just been awesome. I get so much more sleep. I feel so much more rested, because on those days by about 4 p.m., I feel like I wanted to just pass out for the day. It's too much.
Yeah, it's like, where do we get this idea that we have to fall into everybody else's schedule, or like what we should do as
Yeah.
opposed to what we want to do?
Yeah. And your point is so good, because a lot of times we just don't stop and ask ourselves, where did I get this idea that I need to do this? Like, it's those shoulds that just come to us, and we kind of, even our parents, they don't sit down and say, like, my parents never sat down and said, no, you have to do an amazing job at everything. If you don't do top-notch job, we're going to be really disappointed in you. But I just picked up on that and started making rules for myself that I always had to do the maximum amount of things at the very best of my ability at all times, for really no reason. I mean, it's just a thought I had in my head. So it's really nice not to have to act from that thought now.
So do you have any sort of practice or anything you do to like reflect on the shoulds or like what you really want to do versus what you should do?
Yes, I absolutely do. This is something I teach to my clients too, but I use something called the love and fit test. So I just ask myself two questions. One is, do I love this idea? Not like, does this sound okay? Or do I like it? But do I love this idea? So let's say, like my high school girlfriends, I live where I grew up. And so my high school girlfriends were all going to happy hour the other night. And I thought, yes, that sounds like so much fun. I would love to do that with them. And then the second question I ask myself is, does it fit? And I don't mean in that case, does it fit on my calendar? Because I didn't have any plans that night, but does it fit into the lifestyle that I'm trying to create? So to figure that one out, I have to look and see, how's the rest of the week looking? Have I hung out with my kids a lot of nights this week, or have I been gone most of the nights? And then I decided actually it doesn't fit into what I'm trying to create, because I'm trying not to be scheduled back to back all the time. And I'll do it with them another time. And so then I say no. But I use that love and fit test for everything.
I love that. So it's, do I love this idea? And then does it fit into the lifestyle that I'm trying to create? Is that right?
Correct. Yes, exactly. And so maybe somebody else who's trying to create a lifestyle where they're being more social and they're trying to get out more, maybe that would have been a yes for them. Right. So it just depends on what you're trying to create. But so often we decide what to do based on what is already on our calendar or not. It's like, just because there's a white space doesn't mean you have to fill it in.
Oh, that's powerful. Because and I think like sometimes fill it if you do fill it in with yourself. You know what I mean? Like
Exactly.
put something in that you want to do because I don't know, but for me, if I don't see anything in there, like you said, I'll just like pop something in there, automatically say yes. So it's good to either like mark yourself down or like you said, just take a second, pause, reflect on what your options are. You don't have to say yes so quickly.
Yes, exactly. That is such a great point. I feel like our world is so quick and automatic now that if somebody texts you, you feel like you need to answer right back immediately at that time. If someone calls, you have to answer emails, all those things. And it's like you could totally take an hour before you respond to a text. You can say, even face to face, if someone asks you to do something, oh, thank you for the invite. I just need to think about that. No one cares.
Right?
Right.
So something that the O2B listeners struggle with is mom guilt. You know, feeling like, you know, they're not doing enough, or if they have to work, then they feel bad for leaving their kids. What would you say to that, to the mom that's struggling with mom guilt and feeling like she should be doing more for her kids?
I would first of all like give her a big virtual hug and say, you're doing a great job, mom. Because I feel like anybody who's feeling mom guilt and worrying about it, it's because they are super into being a mom and they want to be the best mom they can be. So I feel like it kind of comes sometimes from a place that's good. But I would invite them to create an evidence list and title it at the top, Why I'm a Good Mom. And a lot of times when I challenge people to do this, they're like, I just can't think of anything. Come on. Do you make your kids lunches before they go to school every day? Do you tell them you love them? Do you give them hugs? Do you go to their soccer games? Do you, all the things that we do that are just such habits. And we just don't give ourselves any credit for those. So, what I would suggest doing is creating that and then coming up with a mantra like, I know I'm a good mom. No matter how much time that I'm with my kids, I'm spending it well. Something that really resonates as true, and really work on practicing flipping your mindset to see where you feel good about your parenting and focus on that.
Yeah, I like this idea of an evidence list because it's like sometimes we forget if it's not right in front of our face, it's like we will forget the good things that we have done or the good qualities about
Yeah.
ourselves. And then I would even argue like previously we had Rebecca Kordecki on the podcast and she
Mhm.
created a wall of badassery. And it's like all of the badass things that you've done, you know, you put it on a poster and like you
I
just
love that.
yeah, or all the hard things that you've overcome or been through. But you could do the same thing for being a mom because it's like if you don't see it regularly, you forget it. Or those days where you're like beating yourself up, you know, you could go back and look at that just as a gentle reminder, like, no, you're killing it.
Yes, yes, exactly. And the things that we carry around as moms, we just have so much knowledge and we do so many things for our kids and our family that no one ever really sees. It never goes on a list. It's just like this morning, I thought, okay, I know my daughter's got to run the mile today. So I need to make sure that she gets a good breakfast and that she wears her white tennis shoes. And I didn't say any of that for her. I just got her breakfast and I checked to see what shoes she had on. She had the ones on that I was thinking of and made sure she got out the door on time. And that I tried to make it so it was just a calm, easy morning. But that's good parenting. I know my kids, I care for them. I do these little things for them that they might not even realize that I'm doing. So we just forget about that stuff.
So earlier we talked about balance, but we didn't necessarily talk about it in the way of motherhood. Now,
Mm-hmm.
how do we find balance being moms? It's so easy to like do everything for everyone and never have time for yourself and never do anything for yourself. How do you start to take some of that back?
Yeah, I think first of all is to look at when you're feeling guilty about not spending enough time with your kids or whatever it is that makes you feel guilty, ask yourself, what is my expectation and what am I actually doing? So sometimes people will just, it's kind of like we were talking about with those thoughts that we just carry around and we make them the shoulds. One of my clients, for example, just said, I just feel like I never ever spend time with my kids. And I said, well, how much time do you want to spend with them? Because she was a physician. She had like a real, busy job, obviously, and they were younger, so they went to bed early. So she said, I really would love if I could come in, put my phone down, put my computer down, and sit on the floor with them and just spend time with them for like 30 minutes, just, fully present 30 minutes time. And what we figured out when we talked through it is she really wasn't getting 30 minutes time, even though she was with them for a couple hours in the evening, because she'd get home, open her laptop, try to finish up her notes, take a call here and there. And so she realized that she could accomplish her goal and that it was reachable because 30 minutes didn't feel like an impossible goal. And so she started doing that habit. And that really worked out well for her. And of course, as moms, we have a tendency to put ourselves in last. So then I encouraged her after her kids were in bed that she could just sit in a chair and read a book or watch a TV show or just do something for herself.
So is it a matter of being more intentional, like with what we want?
I do think it's less about the time and more because I mean, do you have kids?
I don't, but I've been a stepmom
Okay.
before, so
Okay, okay. So you know how it is. Sometimes you'll spend a whole day with your kids, but there's not like a lot of special time. I'm thinking on a Sunday in the afternoon, we might all be doing our own thing or whatever. So I could feel good that I was there all day, but I wasn't really there. I would feel much better if we all sat down and had dinner together, even if it was just something I picked up and we talked to each other for 20 minutes. So I feel like we set expectations sometimes that we need to be 24/7, like we're fully present at our job, doing an amazing job. We come home, we're fully present with our kids, then we're fully present cleaning up our home and spend time with our spouse. And it's too much. I feel like we need to back down our expectations because as you know, as a mindfulness person and a coach yourself, if you have expectations that you're going to spend 6 hours a night with your kids and then you spend 1 hour, you're always going to feel like crap about the difference between those two. Where if you put your expectation for 1 hour and you do 1 hour, you can feel great about it.
so oftentimes people look at the guests that come on this show and they're like, oh, Michelle, she's a badass. She has it all together, but she's never had to experience the things I do, or it's not as hard for her as it is for me. Because we
Mm-hmm.
don't see the behind the scenes. It's like social media is all gumdrops and lollipops and everything's
Yeah,
perfect.
sure is.
So, will you share with us a hardship that you've been through to get to where you are today?
Oh, sure. Yes. Well, I when you were saying that, I was literally picturing myself laying on my couch in my old house. I wore these orange sweatpants for like a month straight, and I just barely could get off my couch because I felt so overwhelmed. I was getting divorced. I just had so many thoughts about that at the time. No one in my family is divorced. My parents are still married. How did I get here? What did I do wrong? I was really beating myself up about that. My kids are both adopted. And so their birth parents chose us to be their parents. And I thought, these people gave me their children and now I'm going to be divorced. I mean, I just had so much pressure on myself. And then when I was quitting my job, my ex-husband and I made about the same amount of money in our career. So when we got divorced, he didn't pay me anything. So I quit my job making really good money. And the first year I was in business, I think I made $12,000. So I had this financial strain of trying to do this because I really wanted to live an authentic life and I really wanted to help people. So I have definitely been through some stuff. For sure. And I still am because I'm a single mom. I have my kids like 90% of the time. So I'm the one making all the decisions. Obviously, I consult their dad, but I'm day in, day out the parent who's doing absolutely everything. And I make mistakes and I have to learn from those mistakes. So it's still not sunshine and rainbows. And I try to be not sunshine and rainbows, even on social media and the posts that I make, because I feel like, especially moms, they just have such a high standard and have such a belief that everyone else is doing this. Why can't I? And my belief is no one is doing that thing. It's just some people will talk about it and some won't.
Yeah, and why is that? Why is it that we think that everyone else has all their shit together and we're the ones that don't?
Yeah, I don't know. It's very interesting when I have people write down the thoughts that they think about themselves. And I say, what if you had to say that to your best friend? What if your best friend said that about herself? What would you say? And we are never as mean about other people as we are to ourselves. So I mean, powerfully, I think it's a habit and that we can change it. So it's not like, yeah, we just have to live like this. I think we can change it with work because it's in our power, but it is a shame. And I don't know that men experience this same type of thing that we do.
Right, right. Now, the thoughts in our head, super powerful. Like the things that we're
Yeah.
saying to ourselves, like you said, it's amazing. The things that will come out of our mouth, or maybe they're not even coming out of our mouth since they're in our head, but the things that we say to ourselves that, like, I wouldn't even say to my worst enemy, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It's really terrible. And as you know, when you hear them, they feel true.
Right.
And we just have to be able to take a step back. Again, it's in the pause and the thinking about, what's happening. Take a step back and say, is that really true? The other day, I was talking about this on my own podcast, but the other day, my dog I made peanut butter toast and she ate it off the counter before my kids could eat it for breakfast. And the thought that I had when I saw her do that was something like, my whole life is a disaster and I'm doing everything wrong. Okay. Peanut butter toast that the dog ate, like not that big of a freaking deal, but I made it mean in my mind. My whole life is out of control. I'm not doing anything right, all that. And when I just paused and investigated, I literally laughed. I'm like, oh my gosh, that was quite a doozy, brain. Thank you for throwing that one out. Could we go with something like, I guess I'll make more toast now instead of my whole life is a disaster? And I'm really practiced at mindfulness. And that just happened to me a couple days ago. So it happens.
Yeah. And actually, that's what I was going to ask you. Like, we recognize that it's an issue. So you find out, like, okay, yeah, I am saying this stuff or I am saying this stuff to myself. What do you do next? Is it just kind of talking back like you did and kind of making light of it and realizing, or is there something else you do?
I think the very first and most important step is just recognizing that you had that thought because 95 or so percent of our thoughts are unconscious. So we don't see that we're seeing them. So seeing the thought and realizing what you thought and realizing that thoughts can come into our brain. We don't have control over that, but we get to decide if they're true or not. So just that alone, that like, oh, this is the thought my brain suggested and I don't have to believe it, is really powerful. Just putting, you can't see me say this much space. Oh, I guess some of your podcasts are on video so that maybe some people can't see me saying this, but just putting a little space between your thoughts and yourself. You are not your thoughts. Thoughts come into your head. You can notice them, look at them, decide if you believe them.
Now, earlier we talked about going through divorce and how that was hard. How did you manage? And then also looking back, what do you wish you knew now that you didn't realize then?
Oh my gosh. I wish I knew everything was going to be okay. That is like the main thing I wish I knew. And the great thing in going through all that is that now I know that everything is always going to be okay. But at that time, I did not know that. That was my first major upset in life. So when I was feeling really miserable, like waking up in the middle of the night, I remember I thought I was having a heart attack one time because I had such bad anxiety. I mean, I was in a bad way. And I just decided I'm going to do everything I can to be as mentally healthy as I can. So I had, this is for months, I had a mental health activity of the day. That's when I started meditating. I used the Breathe app for meditating. If anyone's looking to get into that, I still use it every day. Um, I got into meditating. I would pray. At the time, I would go to a Bible study. I went to yoga. I had a counselor. I had a life coach. I mean, every day, my mental health was like my top priority.
So, mental health activity of the day, what does that mean? Just doing something good for your mental health, or what is that?
Yep. Yep. I was doing something good for my mental health. For me, getting up in the morning was the most anxious time. And so I started doing a morning routine. And I have since, I really have continued that practice. I used to do like an hour because I was miserable. And I have now made a 10-minute morning routine that it's on my website if anybody wants to grab it. But it's just a really quick, what are you thinking? And the idea is to get all those shoulds out of your head or negative thoughts that you're thinking. What do you want to think instead? What are you grateful for? And then this is a big one for women, I think. What do I love about myself today? And so if you go through that in the morning, you'll set yourself off on the right foot to have a good day.
What is different for you when you do a morning routine versus when you don't do one?
It is really different. Otherwise, I feel like the day just happens to me. And if I do the morning routine, I feel like I'm purposefully getting in the day, choosing how I want to think, choosing how I want to feel. And the last thing on the worksheet that I created is to just close your eyes and imagine the best case scenario version of your actual day. So, not like, oh, I won the lottery and then I jumped on a jet and went to Europe, but the kind where you're like, I'm going to see all my clients today. I'm going to have a nice dinner with my kids. We're going to relax this evening. Maybe we'll have a fire out in the backyard. I'm going to go to bed early. Just picturing how your day could go. So I feel like that really sets forward in motion the kind of day that you're going to have.
Yeah, it's like our minds are drama,
Yeah.
and they will find all sorts of things or fill all sorts of gaps. And so I like what you're saying because it's like we're kind of filling the gaps ahead of time or setting ourselves up so we don't have to think so much through the day because we've already set our day up for success in the beginning.
Yes. And it's amazing how just doing that work with your mind will create the kind of day that you envision.
I know, mind blowing. I've started doing, or for the last year, I've done an hour meditation in the morning, and it
Oh
just
my
like
gosh.
blows my mind, how much that just like eases you throughout the day as opposed to just stressing out or reacting is probably a bigger thing, is just reacting to things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I just noticed this level of calm when I meditate every day that's just sort of become permanent. And if I feel myself irritable or annoyed, I'm like, oh, I forgot to meditate today. That's what it is. That's why I feel so off. And if I forget, I'll do it right before I go to bed because I don't like to let 24 hours go by without spending, I don't do an hour, but without spending some time on meditation.
Right. So, what is like the biggest problem that your clients come to you with, and what's a solution that you offer them?
The biggest problem that they come to me with is that they feel stressed and overwhelmed and they don't know how to get out. So they feel stuck. And it makes sense, I think, that when you're in that overwhelm, a lot of times people describe it like a tornado of thoughts. You can't get yourself out because you're not calm enough to have rational thoughts or to make plans. And so the solution that I offer them is just helping them pause, take some breaths, figure out what they're thinking, narrow down when they get overwhelmed, and then start working towards things that they can do. Again, it's like the saying no and setting boundaries and just slowly but surely. So I don't offer like a quick solution. I work with my clients for 6 months. I don't do any shorter than that because that's just how long it takes. Step by step, week by week, we'll like 1 week you learn how to say no, then you practice that. And then a couple weeks later, you accidentally say yes when you meant to say no, and then we'll practice it again. So we just keep adding skills on and being gentle and working on self confidence and all those things. So at the end, my clients always report, I just feel calm. And when I feel stressed, I know exactly what to do. And to me, that's the biggest thing because we can't avoid stress in life. But if when you feel stressed, you think, okay, I know what to do now.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it can be hard to pause. It can be hard to like be like, okay, I'm just going to take a break. I'm going to pause. I'm already stressed. I'm already overwhelmed. How is pausing going to help me? I need to get more done. What would you say to that?
Yeah, it's counterintuitive in a way that the secret is in the pausing and the doing less, because people always feel like, oh, I just need to get more done. And when people ask me that, can you help me get more done? I say, that's not my specialty. I will help you feel better. We could get more done, but the pause is just like anything else that at first it's hard and it takes some practice. But I mean, I would imagine meditating for an hour once seemed impossible to you. And
Oh,
now you're doing
absolutely.
it every day, like no problem. So it's just like that. It's just a muscle that has to be built. When I teach my clients how to do it and take the pause, I say, no, don't worry. You're going to go out this week and you're going to completely forget to do it. But just notice afterwards that you forgot. And then next time, just try again. So it's just gently trying again when we don't do it the way we want to. And eventually they get really good at it.
Right, right. And it's like, I like how you said gently reminding ourselves because it's so easy to get in like the beating ourselves up over the things that we didn't do.
Yeah, exactly. And at the beginning of their session, when we talk about wins, even if they said yes when they meant to say no and forgot to pause, whatever, the fact that they noticed it and are reporting it to me is still a win. Like you're getting there. You've done the first part, you will get there. And then the rest comes more easily. But I think the pause, the very beginning part, the pause and learning to notice what you're thinking is the hardest new skill to learn. And once you've got that, it all becomes easier.
So, why is it important to pay attention to the wins?
I feel like it just sets the tone for everything. It's kind of like we were talking about, where if you have this expectation that you're going to spend 5 hours a night with your kids and you spend one, then instead of focusing on the 1 hour you did spend, you're focusing on the whatever difference there was. And so focusing on the wins just reminds us and gets us in the right mindset of looking backwards to see what we have accomplished. And it's really good to have lofty goals, but you can't hold yourself to getting to that goal. You need to look at what you have done on the way to that goal, what your progress has been.
So good. Michelle, let's end with a tip to encourage women who are in the arena fighting for the life that they want.
Okay. Just any tip on any topic?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Well, this is my tip from a woman who has been there. I have been through some really hard times to get here, but there is no better feeling than living your most authentic life. So right now, you probably feel like you want to make a change, but it seems like a lot of work and you're not sure it will be worth it and you're not sure what everyone else thinks. But I promise you, it is so worth it. I had what used to be, if you looked at my life before, you would have thought, oh my gosh, she has everything, amazing career and husband and a beautiful house. And it was nothing compared to what I have now.
And how can we connect with you?
My website is michellegauthier.com and my podcast is Overwhelmed Working Woman. On my podcast, I do like 10 to 15-minute shorter episodes that come out on Monday mornings, because when I was an overwhelmed working woman, Monday mornings were kind of the worst. So I always try to offer a quick tip that you can listen to help get you through the week.
So good. Michelle, thank you so much. You've been a total badass and I've enjoyed hearing your story.
Thank you so much. You're a total badass too. It's good to be in your presence.
And with that, we'll end our show. To all the badass women out there staying in the arena, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, own it and get after it.
Now that you've listened to this episode of Ordinary to Badass, we want to hear from you. Go to our website, ordinarytobadass.com/podcast, and submit your own experience on how you took your life from ordinary to badass and get the chance to be on a future Spotlight episode of the show. That's ordinarytobadass.com/podcast. While you're waiting for the next episode of the show, wipe off the sweat, dust off the dirt, and get back in the arena.